Okay, so today we'll continue on the speaking section and we'll be practicing what we did yesterday, question 3 of the speaking section. Remember, for this task, what you have to do is first read a reading, well, it's an academic passage, right, you could say. And in the text, what you have to do first is write down the title, because that's the main idea, that's the topic. And then you needed to listen to a lecture. Well, look for the definition in the text first. Then you listen to this lecture where you have real world examples of whatever concept you had in the reading. You need to hear the examples, write down your notes, and then you get 30 seconds to prepare, 60 to speak, and you gotta explain the concept using the examples given to you in the lecture, right? And we had a specific template too. Do you have the template in hand, first of all, to use it for today's practice?
Yes, miss.
Okay, perfect. And do you have any questions before we start practicing?
Nothing, miss.
All right, then. So let's see. Okay, so this is going to be the first question we do. Please, you now have 45 seconds to read the article.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a business management class.
So, let me tell you about my own experience with this when I was working for a computer company a couple of years ago. So, one day a coworker and I suggested we should give our computers a design makeover, make them look more up to date. Market research was showing that new customers said they would be more interested in buying our computers if they looked cooler. Our technology was advanced, but the outside design looked really old-fashioned. At first, more than half the group supported us. There were a few senior managers there, though, who didn't support the design change. One of the senior managers said, "Our focus has always been on technology. Changing the look is an unnecessary cost." Almost immediately, some of our supporters changed their minds. Even my coworker changed his mind. When I asked him why after the meeting, he told me he didn't want to make a bad impression on the senior managers. He thought that disagreeing with them might jeopardize his chances of getting a promotion by not looking like a team player. What about me? I hate to admit it, but after a few hours of discussion, I started wondering if it was worth everyone's time to argue about this. As more people sided with senior management, I started to feel like I was the only one holding up the vote. Everyone else seemed to think change wasn't necessary, so I voted against my own idea in the end. So we unanimously decided to stay with the current old-looking design. But this decision ended up costing us a lot of money. That same year, our competitor came out with a new design that attracted some of our customers and prevented us from profiting on potential new customers.
Now the question says, explain groupthink and its effects using the example of the computer company. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So please, you may start speaking now.
Okay, according to the passage, group think is defined as which groups may make bad or irrational decision. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of computer company. He explains that in this company, one worker asked about about the new idea to innovate the looks of these computers, but other workers don't agree with this decision because they
Okay. Not bad, but you ran out of time. You need to summarize the ideas more, especially the ones from the lecture, the example. Always go for the relationship between the reading and the listening, right? So your introduction was great, your concept was great. So groupthink is when a group makes bad decisions or irrational decisions. Maybe you could even say because the individual members of the group are following the others, right? And in the lecture, the example was exactly that. It was how about this group of this computer company, the workers in the computer company made the bad decision of not changing the design of the computers because the members were following the leaders of the group, right? The senior managers. So that even the worker who proposed to have this design makeover ended up changing his mind. But to be more precise and to be more specific, this worker was the professor. This was a story from the professor's own experience. When you have psychology topics, there are three different types of examples that you can have. Psychology. The first one is the one that we had yesterday. You have a general example. So for example, the professor talks about kids in general, right? So when kids are in school, then they usually misbehave and then the teacher gets angry. So the professor is talking about people in general, kids in general, schools in general, teachers in general. Now there's another type of example which is very common as well, and that's a personal example, a personal experience. And this was the one that we just heard. The professor was telling his own story. When he was working in a computer company, he and his coworker had the idea of changing the design of the computers. So he proposed this idea in a meeting, and not everybody, more than half the group initially supported the idea of the design change. But some senior managers didn't agree. They didn't think that it was necessary to change the design. So the other members of the group started changing their minds and starting following the senior managers because they didn't want to look bad with them. They didn't want to make a bad impression. They wanted to feel like a team player. So they changed their mind. Even his coworker changed his mind and ended up voting against the idea. And at the end of the day, even the professor himself changed his mind. And this was a bad decision because they ended up losing a lot of customers. That same year, they say that the competitors, the competition, created a new design for their computers. So they lost a lot of customers, they lost a lot of money because of this irrational decision that they did as a group. Everybody was just trying to follow the group. So it's a personal experience from the professor's own experience. And the other type of example that you can have that we're also going to see is experiments. So there was an experiment done by these. So in this case, we had a personal experience. It was from the professor's own perspective, something that he experienced. So careful with that. To be more precise, you need to talk about him. And second, try to summarize the ideas more. Always go for the ideas that relate directly to the concept, right? If you said that group thing is when groups make bad decisions, so tell me, in this example, the workers in the computer company made the bad decision of not changing the design of the computers because the group members were following the group. And this was a bad decision because they lost a lot of money and lost a lot of consumers. Okay, so focus on summarizing the information and focusing on the relevant part. Okay, Luis, is that okay?
Yes, miss.
Okay, then let's do another one. Maybe we can do an experiment now so that you get to see the second as well. Okay, this one here. So it will be exactly the same. Hold on a minute. Okay, so starting now, you have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a psychology class. For example, I recently read about a case in which a researcher was given two groups of monkeys, and he was asked to train these monkeys to pick up a ball and put it in a box. And he was told to record how many hours it took to train each monkey to learn to do this. Now, before he started the training, the researcher was told that one group of monkeys was highly intelligent and that the other group was less intelligent. In truth, there was no difference between them. All the monkeys were actually very similar in terms of intelligence, but the researcher didn't know that. He thought one group was smarter, so he expected that that group would be easier to train. So, what happened? Well, the researcher trained the monkeys to perform the action, and it turned out that, on average, it took him 2 hours less time to train the supposedly smart monkeys than the supposedly less intelligent monkeys. Why? Well, it turns out that with the supposedly smart monkeys, the researcher smiled at them a lot, gave them a lot of encouragement, talked to them a lot, worked hard to communicate with them. But with the monkeys he thought were less intelligent, he wasn't as enthusiastic. He didn't try quite as hard, wasn't quite as optimistic.
Now the question says, explain how the example from the professor's lecture illustrates the experiment effect. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So please, you can start speaking now.
According to the past experiment effect, is defined as is defined when searchers' expectations affect the outcome of the experiment. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of two groups of monkeys, and they perform task. He explains that it's about two groups of monkeys. It has similar a similar condition, but one group is highly intelligent and another group is not much. And the group one is highly intelligent. It's easier to train. He talks about he
Okay, good. Great introduction. You had the correct definition, and it was honestly a little bit hard to identify it, but you did just fine. So when the researcher's expectations affect the outcome of the experiment. So remember to focus on how the lecture relates to this. So for example, we could say, according to the reading passage, experiment effect occurs when the researcher's expectations affect the outcome of the experiment. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of an experiment that was done with monkeys, where the researcher needed to train these two different groups of monkeys. Now, the research was told, or the research expected, one of the groups to be smarter than the other. And these expectations that he had, because he expected the group that was supposedly smarter to be trained faster. So these expectations that he had affected the results of the experiment, and it ended up being easier to train the group that was supposedly smart. Why? Because he thought that that group was easier to train, so he dedicated more time to that group he thought was smarter, right? He dedicated more time, he put more effort into the group that was supposedly smarter, even though that wasn't true. The two groups of monkeys were exactly the same. I mean, no group was smarter than the other, but his expectations of one group being smarter affected the results, right? Because that group actually was faster to train, not because the group wasn't smarter, but because his expectations affected the outcome. So you need to focus on that specific information. Don't go step by step, going in order or following the sequence of events. Focus on the result, the thing that is related to this. His expectations, what are his expectations? He expected one group to be smarter than the other. How did it affect the outcome? Because he put more effort into training this group. What was the outcome of the experiment? This group that was supposedly smarter was trained in less time, right? So focus on those ideas. You need to keep the definition in mind so that when you're listening, you're just looking for that specific information, and that way you won't run out of time. Okay, I think that's something you're struggling with a little bit. Is that okay?
gives me
Any questions so far?
no.
Okay, next. So this was the experiment. As I told you, it's psychology, and the example is actually an experiment. So let's do something else now. Okay. We're going to do this one here. This is sociobiology, actually. So, as usual, you'll have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. Okay, so a good example of this, found right here in North America, is something an animal called the American pronghorn does. Pronghorns, as you may know, are a kind of deer-like animal. They live out on the open, grassy plains, somewhat in the middle of North America. And they are super fast. Pronghorns are, in fact, noted for being the fastest animal in the Western Hemisphere. Once a pronghorn starts running, zoom! None of its present-day predators, like the bobcat or coyote, can even hope to catch up with it. It's off in a flash. Okay, so why then do pronghorns run so fast? That's the question. Well, it turns out that quite a long time ago, I'm talking tens of thousands of years, things on the grassy plains used to be very different for the pronghorns. Because back then, lions used to live on the plains, chasing and preying upon the pronghorns. And lions, of course, are a very swift-moving mammal, much faster than the bobcat or coyote or other predators that you find on the plains today. But now, however, lions are all extinct in North America. They're no longer a predator of the pronghorn. Tens of thousands of years ago, though, the lions were there, chasing the pronghorns. So, back then, the pronghorn's speed was critical to its survival.
Now the question says, using the example of the pronghorn and lion, explain the concept of relic behavior. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, you can start speaking now.
According to the passage, relic behavior is the time when animals no act in ways that the animal species may display that behavior and not have a clear purpose. In the lecture, the professor gives an example of pronghorn and lion, and he explains I don't have clear idea means.
Okay, no problem. But if that ever happens when you're taking a test, you need to make sure that you say something, right? Even if you continue with the same ideas from the listening, you at least know that the example was the pronghorn lion. So you can say the professor gives the example of pronghorn lion and explains that these animals had a behavior that in the past had a specific purpose, but that purpose disappeared long ago. You know, you can use ideas from the reading, but make sure that you say something. So if you don't have the content very well, make up for it with a good delivery, good pronunciation, articulation, intonation, and with good grammar and good vocabulary. Okay. Now, in this case, what is the definition of relic behavior?
The behavior is not the same with the past, is changing.
Basically, it's a behavior that no longer serves a clear purpose in an animal. It says these behaviors, known as relic behaviors, were useful to the animal when the species habitat was different, right? So the original purpose of the behavior may have disappeared long ago, even thousands of years before. So it's basically that, it's a behavior that no longer serves a clear purpose. So the behavior had an original purpose in the past. It had a practical purpose in the past, but due to changed conditions in the habitat of the animal, that purpose disappeared. And now the behavior still remains. So these animals have the same behavior now, but this behavior doesn't have a purpose anymore. So it's a behavior that's not useful to the animal. It doesn't have a purpose because the purpose disappeared in the past. So the lecture talks about pronghorns and lions. What do they say? What behavior are they discussing? Do you want to maybe listen to the lecture again? Now do you understand better the definition?
Okay.
Okay, let's listen to it again.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. Okay, so a good example of this, found right here in North America, is something an animal called the American pronghorn does. Pronghorns, as you may know, are a kind of deer-like animal. They live out on the open, grassy plains, somewhat in the middle of North America. And they are super fast. Pronghorns are, in fact, noted for being the fastest animal in the Western Hemisphere. Once a pronghorn starts running, zoom! None of its present-day predators, like the bobcat or coyote, can even hope to catch up with it. It's off in a flash. Okay, so why then do pronghorns run so fast? That's the question. Well, it turns out that quite a long time ago, I'm talking tens of thousands of years, things on the grassy plains used to be very different for the pronghorns. Because back then, lions used to live on the plains, chasing and preying upon the pronghorns. And lions, of course, are a very swift-moving mammal, much faster than the bobcat or coyote or other predators that you find on the plains today. But now, however, lions are all extinct in North America. They're no longer a predator of the pronghorn. Tens of thousands of years ago, though, the lions were there, chasing the pronghorns. So, back then, the pronghorn's speed was critical to its survival.
Okay, so you will have 30 more seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, you may start speaking now. Luis, you there?
I don't have the definition. I have the problem with that.
Okay. Chronic behavior is a behavior that doesn't have a clear purpose, that is not useful to the animal now, because the purpose disappeared in the past, long time ago. That is relic behavior. Right? So do you want to try?
Okay.
Right.
According to the past, relic behavior is defined as a behavior that no longer serves a clear purpose. In the lecture, the professor gives example of the foghorn and lion. He explains that in the past they were animals, the fastest animals, and mm, the predators don't catch up easily because they have swiftly moving. And but now the the place is not the same. That's why
Okay. Something like that, yes. So yes, what the professor says is that pronghorns are really fast. They are like a deer-like animal that live in North America, and they are really, really fast. And that's the behavior that we're talking about. So why are these pronghorns fast? The professor says that in the past, thousands of years ago, lions used to live in North America too. And lions used to chase upon pronghorns. They were the predators for pronghorns. So lions would would uh, would chase them, right? And that's why they became so fast. That's why pronghorns are so fast, because they used to escape from lions. However, now lions are no longer living in North America. They are already extinct in North America. So they don't have to be fast anymore, right? They don't need to run so fast because there's no lions. So that's why it's a relic behavior, because it's a behavior that still remains, even though it doesn't have a purpose anymore because of the changed conditions and the changed habitat. Um, they don't need to be fast anymore, but they are still fast. It's a relic behavior, something that they have like that they have kept from thousands of years ago. You know, so careful. In this case, the comprehension was a little bit weak. Maybe why do you think you had problems understanding the ideas? Was it vocabulary? Was it the speed in which the professor was speaking? What do you think was missing?
I think it's vocabulary, uh, because I miss the words, the fundamental words. I think that the meaning of, I didn't understand the meaning.
Okay. So yes, maybe vocabulary in relation to biology, sociobiology, maybe you're missing that. So make sure that you practice listening to this type of content, podcasts and videos, and this type of thing to improve, expand your vocabulary in that sense. Okay. Let's see, let's try another one. Okay, here. This is actually business. Okay. So please, you may start reading the text now.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a business management class. Okay, so we've been talking about starting a business. Let's say I want to open up a pizza restaurant. Well, I know how tough it is to make a new business succeed, and I want a sure thing. So I contact a big company that owns a chain of pizza places. Let's say it's called Pizza Town, and I pay for the rights to call my restaurant Pizza Town and to sell Pizza Town's special, one-of-a-kind pizza. Now, since everyone's heard of Pizza Town, it's really popular, I don't have to worry about whether people will want to eat my pizza or not. I already know this pizza will sell well because it's a known thing, and that means that there's a better chance my business will succeed. Now, in exchange for being able to call my restaurant Pizza Town, I have to agree to run the business the Pizza Town way, and Pizza Town trains me to do this. They show me how to do everything. How to make my pizzas taste like Pizza Town pizzas, how to advertise, even how to make my store look like a Pizza Town. Now, this means that I don't have a lot of freedom or choice in the way I run my business. But in a lot of ways, this is great for me. After all, Pizza Town's way generally works. They sell a lot of pizza.
Okay. Using the example given by the professor, explain how franchising works. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. Please, you may start speaking now.
Okay, according to the passage, franchising is defined when you pay for the right to use the company's name and you can sell the company products. In the lecture, the professor gives example of Pizza Town. He explains the franchising is it's a good idea because you don't worry about because the company gives how to do how to advertise and it's you pay the rights for an established company and that reduce the risks to fail.
Okay, exactly. That reduces the risk of failing. Yes. Or a failure. Yeah. Okay, well done. So in this case, you had no problem understanding the ideas. I can see your definition was correct. Franchising is paying for the rights to use the name of an already established company and for selling their products. Now, maybe the only tip I can give you is try not to generalize the examples too much. Like in this case, they were talking about one specific type of company, right? A restaurant that wanted, like if somebody wants to open a pizza restaurant, and he even gives the example of Pizza Town, right? So make sure that you mention those details. You don't just generalize the ideas, but I wouldn't really change anything else. I think it was a really great response. Okay, let's see. Let's try another one. Okay, here. So you will have now 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
Okay, so this comes up a lot when people make career decisions. A friend of mine from college always wanted to be a film reviewer. He was a film major and he loved movies. Most of all, he loved to write about movies. So when he graduated, he looked for a job as a film reviewer for a newspaper because, as a film reviewer, he'd get to see films for free and would be paid to write about them. That's what he loved. But he couldn't find a job as a film reviewer. So he took a position as a news reporter instead for a newspaper, investigating stories, writing about events, what news reporters do. Now, at first, my friend wasn't sure he'd be any good at this. He'd never been a news reporter before. But eventually, he adjusted and gained confidence, and he got used to the job. And he realized he was actually a pretty good reporter. Anyway, here's the thing. After a few years, the film reviewer for the newspaper where he worked quit, and my friend was offered her job. This was his dream, right? His opportunity to be a film reviewer had finally come, and the new job would actually pay more, too. But did he take the job? Nope, he turned it down. He told me he'd gotten used to being a news reporter, and he just didn't want to try something else. It seemed like too big of a change since, well, there was a chance that the new job might not work out.
Okay. Now, using the example from the lecture, explain the comfort zone bias. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So please, you can start speaking now.
Okay, according to the passage, comfort zone bias is defined as that is when remaining in comfortable situation rather than entering into a new one. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of his friend. He explains that first he wants to be a film reviewer, but he go out his comfort zone and he starts to write to the newspaper about he was a news reporter with investigation.
Okay, yes. I mean, you were explaining the ideas well, but try to summarize more, right? Don't go into the details. So, comfort zone bias, as you said, is that tendency of remaining in comfortable, familiar situations. So focus on that part. Obviously, you need a little bit of context. So yes, it's about the professor's friend. He wanted to be a film reviewer. He liked writing about movies. But when he graduated, he couldn't find a job as a film reviewer, right? So he started working as a news reporter, investigating events, reporting the news, stuff like that. Now, he became so used to doing that, that became his comfort zone, right? He became used to being a reporter. He was a good reporter. And when he finally had the opportunity of being a film reviewer, which was his dream job, what he wanted to do since he was in college, he turned that offer down. He rejected that offer because he didn't want to go out of his comfort zone. He wanted to remain in that familiar situation because he was afraid. He was afraid of trying something new, of pursuing a new opportunity. So yes, summarize a little bit more, but I would say it was good. Try to add careful with the verb tenses always. Everything has to be in the simple present if you're going to choose the simple present. So everything needs to be in the simple present, conjugating in the third person, and maybe you can add a few transitions, right? Initially, he wanted to be a film reviewer. However, he couldn't find a job as a film reviewer. Therefore, he took a position as a news reporter. Afterwards, he finally had the opportunity of being a news reporter. Nevertheless, he rejected the offer since he was in his comfort zone and didn't want to get out. Right? So use those transitions. Practice maybe replacing the and, the so, the buts, because, okay?
Okay, Miss.
Okay, let's do one more. Okay, here. So you'll have 45 seconds to read the text.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in an environmental science class.
So, one example of this is the macaw, the great green macaw. Now, the great green macaw is a beautiful bird, a fairly large-sized parrot known for its colorful feathers, gorgeous green feathers with some red and blue feathers too. The macaw lives in the South American rainforest, in a part of the rainforest where a lot of trees had been cut down, trees that the macaw relies on for its food and nesting. So, the macaw was in trouble. And, of course, along with the trees, a lot of other animals were in trouble too. Lots of birds, bats, and frogs also lived in these trees. So, when the trees were cut down and cleared away, these animals also didn't have a place to live anymore, and their populations drastically declined. So, what a concerned group of people in the area did was they started spreading the word about how the macaw, this really beautiful bird, needed help. They made little books with information about the macaw, with pictures, full-colored pictures of the macaw that showed off its beautiful feathers. And they passed out these little books, these informational brochures. They distributed them to people in schools and community centers in the area. And a lot of people responded. They contributed money and helped the group set up some protected land, a special area where no one could cut down the trees, so the macaw would be safe. And the macaw's population started to increase, and other birds and bats and frogs came back to the area too. Their numbers increased along with the trees.
Okay. Now, using the example of the macaw from the lecture, explain the concept of flagship species. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So please, you may start speaking now.
Okay, according to the passage, flag-shaped species is defined as one that people are likely to find attractive and interesting and wants to protect their living in the treatment. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of great green macaque. He explains that this South American bird has trouble, and this species starts to decline, and the people contributed to help this bird, and with this help contributed to this species increase.
Okay, all right, great. So yes, I would say that everything was okay, but it was kind of, you were missing a few important details. So yes, what you said about a flagship species is correct. It's a species that humans are, or that people are likely to be interested in help, right? But the thing is that it's a species that people take, so they take one species of an entire habitat to represent many other species and the entire habitat in its own, right? So the flagship species is one that is used to raise public awareness and motivate people to take action to protect a threatened habitat. So it's like they take one single animal to represent the entire habitat, and people are going to, in order to help this animal, they are going to contribute and they're going to end up helping the entire habitat, right? And all of the other species that live there. So that was something that was missing, right? So you talked about how the macaw was in danger and how people started contributing for the macaw. So all of that is correct, but maybe it was also important to mention that when people were contributing to help the macaw, they were also helping the other animals, at the same time. So the macaw was just a representation of the entire habitat. So maybe that was also important to mention, but it wasn't bad. I think it was a good response too. Just make sure that you read everything, even if you don't take notes on everything in the reading. Read everything so that way you can get to see the other details that may be important as well. Okay, but it was good. Is that okay, Luis? Do you have any questions at all about what we did today or this question, this task?
No, miss.
Okay, good. Then please don't forget to fill out today's daily survey as you go. And I will be seeing you tomorrow then in class.
Miss. Bye, miss.
Bye-bye, take care.